Hi, this is Diana. Welcome back to my channel. This channel is all about books and reading, and if this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you'll consider subscribing for more videos like this. So today I'm going to do a wrap up of all the books that I read in August 2019. There were a total of 12 books. Some of them were non-fiction, but primarily they were just fiction books, and let me quickly go through them one by one and tell you all about the books I read. The first book I read was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Now this is a very famous book. The story is about Christopher Boone, who's 15 years old, and he's somewhere on the autistic spectrum, which means that he has very peculiar idiosyncrasies, and the adults around him, including his parents, find it very difficult to understand him and relate to him, even though they do try their best. But Christopher is a whiz with numbers, and he retains all this information, and he can rattle off things like that. That is very interesting at the beginning of the book, but it really becomes tiresome after a while. Things take a very interesting turn when Christopher discovers that his neighbor's dog Wellington has been murdered with a pitchfork, and so he takes it upon himself to investigate the murder. Things are compounded and get really uncomfortable for him when he realizes that his own father has been keeping a huge secret from him. I had been meaning to read this book for a very long time, and I'm glad I got around to it because it really is one of the better YA books, YA/mystery novels out there. The next book I read was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. Now, if you've seen the cover of this book and if you read the title, you might believe that this is a book about just an entitled, rich, spoiled brat who doesn't want to do anything with her life. And on a superficial level, yes, it is about that, but it's really about something much deeper and darker. So there's an unnamed narrator in this book, and she decides to take a year off from her life because she's deeply depressed, and she believes taking a year off will help her to get things into perspective. And after a year, if she feels that life is still not worth living, then she might decide to end it. And I really found this book quite dark and disturbing, even though it's handled in a very humorous and flippant way. She finds a psychiatrist in the Yellow Pages who gives her as many drugs as she wants, any drugs that she wants, which she then combines with alcohol, and she keeps plying herself with all these drugs and all this alcohol, and she sleeps through most of the year. Now you need to understand that this is somebody who's very depressed and who has a lot of issues, and it's really sad that there's a psychiatrist like this who is just enabling her instead of trying to help her. And I thought that there was a lot of trigger like stuff in this book. It really felt dark, and I was really disturbed when I read it. At the end of the book, even though it's quite a tragic end, I do think that for the narrator herself, the end was quite hopeful. There was a sliver of hope that I saw, that she would be able to make her life better and she would be able to live as a happier person. The next book was The Strange Library by Haruki Murakami. I'm sure a lot of you have already read it, and this was the first time I read it. I really thought it was a strange and weird story. I mean, it starts off really simply by this boy who goes into a library, and then he's imprisoned by this old man who tells him that he has to learn 3 books from cover to cover, otherwise he'll be imprisoned there forever and he will never be set free. He comes across 2 other people. I mean, there are 2 people who help him. They become his friends. One is a sheep man and one is another girl, and they try to help him to escape, but the old man catches them when they're trying to find their way out of the library. And this story will make you really wonder whether what he experienced was just a dream or just a memory from his past, or whether it was something real. Really not a scary or a horrifying story, but a really weird story which will stay in your mind for some time to come. The next book I read was The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. Now, this is kind of a retelling of Homer's Iliad, but from a different character's perspective. This book is set in a time when the war between the Trojans and the Greeks has been raging for 10 years already, and Achilles is all powerful and almighty. He's destroyed so many cities and villages, and he destroys the kingdom of Briseis, and he kills her husband and her brothers. So she's taken captive and she becomes his concubine in this place that is full of squalor and misery and dirt and poverty, and she recounts her days over there as his concubine till he is killed in war finally, and she gets a respite from that kind of a life. I thought some of the language that was used in the book was a little more modern and colloquial than it should have been, but apart from that, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a wonderful book. I also read Ask Again Yes by Mary Beth Keane, and this is a story about Francis Gleason and Brian Stanhope. They're two rookie cops in the New York Police Department, and they end up being neighbors and potentially friends, but then something very tragic happens in their families which causes a rift between them. The story kind of traces their lives over many decades, and later their kids, Peter and Kate, grow up and fall in love and get married, but there is something really bad that is underlying all their lives. I like this story because it's actually representative of the kinds of decisions that we are confronted with and we are forced to take in real life, and also because it asks us what we are willing to forgive for our families and for the people that we love. Another book I read was A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi. Now, this is set in 2002, which is a year after 9/11, and there is a lot of political instability and intolerance in the US, and there's this girl called Shireen who is an Irani. She wears a hijab and she is tormented endlessly by the Americans because of her religion, because of her customs and her culture, and she really has a tough time in high school. But then she meets this boy called Ocean James and she falls in love with him. The story is about the romance between Shireen and Ocean and the lengths that Ocean is willing to go to protect his love for Shireen, and the way he tries to keep her away from all the racism and the nastiness that people are throwing her way. It was a cute love story, not your regular teeny popper romance, and it had a few more layers to it. But overall, I didn't like the handling of the end of the story. I think it could have been handled much better. But apart from that, I quite enjoyed reading the story and I would recommend it definitely. The next book I read was The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. This book is set in 1952 in Tehran and is about this girl called Roya and this boy called Behran Aslan, and they are teenagers. They're barely 17 years old and they want to run away and get married. Now, there's a lot of tension in the country because the Prime Minister is being overthrown, and there's a lot of riots and bombings and shootings and such, and they need to be really careful. But one day Behran tells Roya to meet him in the town square and they would go and get married, but he never shows up to their agreed meeting place. Then it is 60 years later and Roya realizes that Behran is in a home which is very close by to where she lives, and she goes and confronts him about why he never turned up that day all those years ago and why he gave up the chance to be with the woman that he loved. It is a love story, but it's also so much more than that. It's about mental health and it's about family and patriotism and loyalty. And I really enjoyed this story. It was not your run-of-the-mill love story. It was something much more than that. These are the kind of romances that I love to read, where there's so much more to the story than just boy meets girl and falls in love and lives happily ever after. I enjoyed this book. I recommend it. I'm sure you love reading it too. Another quick and easy read was by Taylor Jenkins Reid, who's fast becoming one of my favorite authors, I think. This was The Evidence of the Affair, and it's a short novel about 100 pages long, written in a letter form. This is a story about two people who are cheating on their spouses, and their respective spouses get to know about the affair, and they start writing letters to each other to figure out what they should do next. It's just a simple story about infidelity and love, but I really enjoyed reading it, and I think Taylor Jenkins Reid really manages to put her finger on the things about human frailty and about human behavior that are common to us all and affect us all. The next book I read was An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, and as you know, this was the book that won the Women's Prize for Fiction for 2019. In my opinion, there were better books on the list, on the short list, that could have won the prize, but I suppose there are a lot of considerations that go into deciding who the prize winner would be. But anyway, let's get into the story. This is a story about Ray and Celestial, a newly married couple. They've hardly been married for about a year, and they go to visit Ray's parents in his hometown, and they live in a hotel for the night when a woman, a guest at the hotel, accuses Ray of rape, and he's arrested and put in jail. Now, it's very evident that Ray has not committed the crime, but he is convicted anyway, and he's put in jail for about, I think, 14 years. What happens while he's in jail is that since their marriage has not had time to bloom and prosper, it actually starts to fall apart, and they are exchanging letters, and that's how they talk to each other, and Celestial tells him that she wants a divorce. Later, Ray gets off early after just 5 years of imprisonment. He gets off for good behavior, but he doesn't know whether when he goes back to his wife, whether he'll still have a wife left and he will still have a marriage left or not. And that's what this book is about. It's just an examination of a marriage, what it means to be married, what it means to be loyal and devoted to one person, whether it's even possible under circumstances that just threaten to crush you and destroy you. It was an interesting read. I was invested in the characters of Celestial and Ray, but it's not something that stood out really in my mind or that will stick with me for a long time to come. But yes, I would recommend it. You could go ahead and pick it up. It's worth a read. The last book I read was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. Now, this is a book that gives you a lot to think about. After I finished reading it, I really needed to give myself a day or two to really think about all the ideas that were presented in this book. We have a lot to worry about in these present times, and what the author tries to do with this book is he tries to tell us what is worth worrying about. So, for example, he tackles issues like what robots and computers and AI is going to mean for the workforce in the future. Are we going to have jobs or not? Should we really fear terrorism? How do we keep ourselves away from this epidemic of fake news? And how should we think of countries and religion? Are they relevant anymore, or are they just a construct of our collective minds? These and other questions are what he leaves with us to consider and to think about, instead of blindly believing what we hear or what we see, and really thinking about the things that are important and that are going to affect our lives, rather than believing all the false data that is presented to us every day. I think this book needs to be read a bit slowly, because you would need to pause frequently to consider what the author is saying and how he's presenting his point of view, and whether you agree to that point of view or whether you have differing opinions on it. So that was my wrap up for August 2019. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you have to say about them in the comment section below. If you like this video, please don't forget to press the like button, and also to subscribe to my channel for more videos on books and reading. I'll be back with another video soon. I'll see you then. Bye.